Hey guys! The poem I chose to analyze for this assignment and presentation is Robert Frost in a Disused Graveyard. The setting is a graveyard that hasn't had anyone buried in it in a long time. To me, the tone of the poem is almost whimsical and one of imparting human features of emotion and childlike understanding on the stones, and talks of how easily it would be to deceive the stones in believing men never died anymore and no dead would ever come to visit and stay again. The stones are a character, as are the dead and living. I see Frost as a narrator, or him telling the story of an unknown visitor of the cemetery who come in remembrance of those they loved who have died. In the poem, Frost gives life to the headstones in the verses. It would be easy to be clever and tell the stones men hate to die. And the graveyard was once flourishing and had become used to having people buried regularly within its boundaries. Now people only come to visit the graveyards and see the stones of those already buried. From the previous verses, Frost writes as if the stones are left, wondering why no dead ever come to live in the cemetery anymore, and thinks how a person could be clever and easily pull a trick on the stones by telling them men have stopped dying now and forever. Also, this is not true, and men will continue to die now and through eternity. Frost believes the stones would believe this clever farce when he says, "I think they would believe the lie." Now the only humans that visit the graveyard are the living who are visiting the deceased who now reside in the graveyard. This is evidenced by the lines in the poem, "The living come with grassy tree, and the graveyard draws the living still." The stones must find it ironic that the graveyard is a place for the dead. Yet in a recent time, only the living now come to visit the dead who in the past came to live within the graveyard. Yet they do not stay. The living come to visit the dead for a short time and then go their way, as we see when Frost says, the ones who's living come today to read the stones and go away. Yet the dead always stay when the living go, and we are led to believe the stones are hopeful. More dead will come to live in the graveyard, as evidenced by the line which reads, "Tomorrow dead will come to stay." How sad it would be for the stones if the stones were told men hate to die and have stopped dying now forever, which would be a cruel trick, making them think no more dead would ever come to reside in the cemetery. Robert Frost's poem in a Disused Graveyard is a haunting tale of an old graveyard no longer used to bury dead, and the poem ascribes a personality to the stones so they are able to wonder why the dead never come anymore and the living only come to read the stones and visit for a short time until they leave. For one of my second sources I used was an analyst from Shivpreet Singh. Singh noticed something that I did not pick up on, where I focused more on the gravestones, how they feel about no dead coming to live there anymore, and only the living come to visit then depart. Singh looked at the narrator and how the narrator doesn't want to be reminded of death. To Singh, the gravestones in the graveyard are a constant reminder of death. The stones are also the stones also serve as a reminder to the narrator that tomorrow dead will come to stay, reminding the narrator that death will eventually come to him, something he desperately wants to not think about. Singh believes humans are like the stones in that we tend to forget death. In addition, like the gravestones who hold on to the thought that once again the dead will come, humans are sure of something that will not come to pass. Like the stones, humans are gullible and try to trick themselves into believing death will not come for them at all. Although death is inevitable, Singh believes we are like gravestones. We are dead. We are like dead graveyards, and he thinks that, like the stones, if someone would tell us that death would not happen anymore, we would probably believe them. To me, that means Singh's beliefs in people are like the stones, gullible and easily fooled to believe anything. As I read the poem, I saw this as of the stones in the graveyard, but did not notice this symbolism for the people. The secondary source I used was in a disused graveyard, poem summary and analysis. This source again places more on the human emotion of sadness of death to come, and how people do not like to be reminded of the fact. The author tells us, writing on the tombstone fetch and the remembrance of close ones, and tells us their arrival brings sadness. Like the last source, the author seems more into the sadness of humans visiting and reading stones of their departing loved ones. The verses of the tombstone stand as an indirect reminder that they will soon die. The author does make a reference to how the stones feel through the statement. The marble stones cannot understand why no more dead bodies are brought there for burial, as if the stones were alive and missed the dead coming there to live. The poet tells the stone that men hate to die and have stopped dying now and forever. This is not true, but the poet feels the stones will believe it anyway and see no new bodies being buried as proof of the truth of the statement. Again, the focus is turned on how man feels and how the stones stand to remind man of the death that is inevitable. The stones remind man no amount of shrinking from death will save man from it. This poem is a short yet meaningful poem. I thought the poem was simple and straightforward until I read the secondary sources, who focus more on humans and how the stones stirred the strong emotion of sadness they feel as they are compelled to contemplate death. Death will come to all of us, no matter how many people try to put it out of their minds. I saw the poem as it was trying to put simplistic, almost childlike emotion on the stones, who were bewildered at how people once buried their dead in the cemetery, which has not happened in a long time. Now only the living come to visit the stones of their loved ones who have died. Frost alludes to how childlike and gullible the stones are, that if one tried to deceive them by saying people hated death and decided to stop dying, the poor stones would believe this tale. The secondary source identified more with the emotion of sadness, death that has come, that is to come, whereas I saw the poem as a sadness among the stones that wondered why dead never came to live there anymore.